Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned to talk about penguins. Roger and I love penguins. I mean, not the birds. We love the birds too. We love the birds too, but we're not talking about the birds today. We're talking about penguin classics. We're talking about these penguins. Penguin, my favorite classic reprint house. Every publisher, of course, can publish classics, those books that have withstood the test of time and are, often conveniently in the public domain. Anybody could publish them for the most part, but I think Penguin does the best job overall. And I love penguins. I love them. I've talked about penguins a lot, individual penguins on my channel, but I've never really sat down and thought about or talked about why I love just Penguin Classics as a series of books and as a publisher of books. They're fantastic, and I think overall they do the best job. Overall, there are exceptions, but overall, I think Penguin does the best job, and they tend to have great scholarship. They tend to have really good introductions and notes, usually worthy of the works that they're talking about. There are exceptions here and there, but for the most part, they just do a magnificent job on their books. They tend to be very attractive. This particular cover design has been copied over and over again. It's just so simple and so awesome. It's a great design where you can really feature a lot of really nice artwork. It's cool. And I love penguins. Sometimes Penguin doesn't do the best job. Sometimes other publishers do better versions of individual books or authors. Probably the publishing company that comes closest, I think, is probably Oxford. Oxford really, really wants to be Penguin, but they're not. But Oxford has some really nice volumes as well. I actually prefer their M.R. James volume to Penguins, if only because they put everything in one volume. Sometimes Penguin makes some odd decisions in their books, such as splitting M.R. James into two volumes when it was completely unnecessary. It easily fits into one. Oxford also does a better Arthur Machen volume, and there are probably other examples. But then it goes the other way too. I mean, Penguin has a fantastic 3-volume set of H.P. Lovecraft. Oxford has 1 volume of H.P. Lovecraft that really feels like they just put it out because they felt like they had to, but they don't really want to because it's Lovecraft. He's not classy like M.R. James. Really feels like they put that volume out, which is, it doesn't have the corrected texts when it easily could, has a selection of a few stories, and that's it. They put it out because they had to. Penguin does a much, much better job with Lovecraft than Oxford. Oxford, though, comes close overall as a reprint house, though. They do some nice books. Still think Penguins are better. And Penguins have pretty much always been cool. Penguins have been around for a while. I think it was from 1946. I will find out. I will set this down because I also have this. This is the Penguin Classics book, which is really awesome. They put out a couple of these. This is the Penguin Classic book, and then we've got the Penguin Modern Classics. Modern Classics are kind of a British thing, I think. You don't see those too much here in the States. But this one is really nice, and it shows in here the very first Penguin Classic that was ever published, which was this one. This is the Odyssey, published in 1946. This is a translation by E.V. Rue, which is one of my favorite translations of the Odyssey. It's the one, I think, if you've never read the Odyssey before, it's a good one to read. Very readable book. But this is how Penguin Classics looked when they first came out. And originally, Penguins were, they concentrated on translations of the classics, you know, like the Greek and Roman classics. Eventually, though, they started publishing classics of all genres, and they have a pretty impressive list of books that they've published. And the cover designs over time have been really cool. I'll show you a few. There was that first one. They started to jazz it up just a little bit. Here we have the Iliad. I know, they published the Odyssey before the Iliad. Why'd they publish the sequel before the first part? I don't know. But this is the Odyssey by Homer. Also translated by E.V. Rue. It's really, really nice. And the cover design is simple, very simple, but cool. They changed over time, and then we started getting the Black Spine classics, which has become their iconic style. They had this series in the 60s. This is Livy, their early history of Rome. They had a whole bunch of these with very simple cover designs. This one just showing a coin. A lot of coins on these old ancient history volumes. But again, very simple but attractive. And then the ones I grew up with were these. You had this style, where you had the black spine and you had the cover in a little box, and you still had a fair amount of space for an illustration. This is Matthew Lewis's The Monk, which I'm probably going to be rereading. I don't know if I'll reread it this year, but I want to get back to this story. This was an interesting book, The Monk. But when I was growing up and when I first discovered Penguins, this is how they looked. They looked like this. And I really like this design. But they did change it, and they changed it to this, which has been enormously popular and frequently copied. This particular style with the stripe, with the little penguin in there, the title, and the title of the book with the author over the title. I can barely speak this morning. You know, this is what I do. This is what I get for making videos at 4 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, this is a very nice style. This is Bram Stoker's Dracula's Guest and Other Weird Stories. Awesome volume from Penguin. Now, they did this style for years, and then they recently, within the last couple of years, changed it to this, where they have a much bigger stripe. The wording is, you know, it's a little dull, actually. I actually prefer this style. I think this looks a lot better than this. But I think they kind of felt like they needed to make this change. This is just speculation on my part, but I think they made this change just because this cover design was being copied so much by independent publishers. So if you go online, for example, to Amazon or something, and you see a bunch of tiny pictures of classics, and if you just type in Moby Dick, and you might get a picture that looks exactly like a penguin, except, you know, in the stripe, they don't have the penguin there, but it's hard to see because it's tiny. You know, you might buy a book that you think is a penguin volume, and it's not. It's just a copy of the cover design. And so this makes it would be easier to tell that this is a penguin if you're looking at this on a tiny screen, like on a phone or something. I think that is probably why they made this change. Probably. Again, that's speculation. I don't know for sure. I think it's fine. It's fine. I like the earlier version better than this. But the change is not huge. It's still a pretty classy looking book. I like these a lot. There are issues with Penguin Classics. Frequently, the paper is not of the best quality. It tends to, you know, yellow in no time at all. This is a Penguin 20th Century Classic, which they made a while for in the 20th century. This is what we had in the United States for modern classics. We had the 20th Century Classics until the early 2000s, when they decided not to do these anymore because they suddenly realized, wait, it's not the 20th century anymore. And so then they just republished all of this line, the 20th Century Classics line, and they just put it in the regular Black Spine Classics series. But it was kind of cool, had the whole non-Black Spine thing going on, but otherwise it's the same thing. But it was a kind of cool design that they had going on for a while. But I was talking about some quality issues. First of all, this is Livy again. The covers on these, as soon as this style, which I said is a very attractive style, but as soon as these came out, I noticed that the covers on them are very stiff. They're stiff, and they're the kind of covers that become damaged really easily. So they become damaged really easily, and on the spines, you frequently see these white marks because, they just, I mean, if you ever see these in a Barnes & Noble, they usually look like they've been half destroyed penguins, because they just don't hold up to mangling. If you take care of them, they'll be fine, but they don't hold up too well to being dropped or mangled or used super frequently. You usually end up with a book that kind of looks like that. And you can't see it, but there's a little crease there in the corner. So there's that. And there's that the paper isn't of the highest quality usually, but it doesn't matter. Books, one nice thing about books is that even if they're beat up and tattered, unless the pages start falling out, they're still completely useful and you can read them. But there is that about these. But still, they're pretty awesome. They publish all kinds of great stuff. Now, they do have these as well, which I think are really nice. These are the Penguin Classics Deluxe editions, where they have, the deckled edges and the French flaps and all the fanciness that you could put on a paperback volume. Really interesting artwork on the covers. This one looks really nice. Not all of their Penguin Classics Deluxe editions look all that great. Some of the artistic choices that they've made are interesting, but usually they're pretty nice, and they're really well-made paperback books. In contrast to the regular Black Spine Classics, these things seem like they'll hold up pretty well, and you can make these extra huge. I kind of wish that they would do some things, like I wish they'd make a complete Livy in a deluxe edition. One of the decisions that Penguin's made is with Plutarch, where they split up Plutarch. Plutarch's Lives, they split up Plutarch into a bunch of different books when they could have just done a really nice one volume. And they could do a really nice Plutarch in a deluxe edition, but they just haven't for some reason. I guess they think nobody will buy it. I don't know. I would buy it. Roger and I would both, there's two sales right there. Roger and I would both buy a nice deluxe edition of Plutarch's Lives in its original form. That would be nice if Penguin would do that. Penguin does some nice things, and they have this big Jane Austen volume. I've never actually read it, but I don't know why. Jane Austen, famous classic horror novelist Jane Austen, she wrote about zombies and sea monsters and stuff. This is what I hear. I haven't actually read the books yet, but I've got all of Jane Austen's novels in this one nice deluxe edition. They do stuff like this, Penguin. So, you know, when I wanted to dive into Jane Austen and all her terrifying works, you know, I've got this. Maybe I'll do that this year. I probably won't, but I have it if I want to. You know, Penguin, they're awesome. And they do some very nice translations of different works. This is Victor Hugo's Les Mis right there. I've read this book before, but I've never read this translation. I'm actually really looking forward to this one. Who does this translation? I always forget. This translation is done by, translated in notes by Christine Doniger. So I'm looking forward to this. And this is with the cover design that I particularly like, that I kind of wish they had kept. But I love these. Penguin also, they have made some interesting choices about what are classics and what are not. The famous Penguin Classics edition of Morrissey's autobiography, for example, was a choice not many people agreed with. But they've made some other interesting choices about what books, you know, are classics and what are not. You know, don't always agree, but I'm glad that they do that. I'm glad that they, you know, will push the envelope on what is a classic work and what is not. They've published some interesting things. But they're magnificent, and I'll shut up because I've gone on long enough and I have to get ready to go to work. But Penguins, still my favorite. I still think they do the best job overall. If you disagree, let me know down below in the comments, in the commentary. And are we ever going to take these Christmas lights down? Maybe in January. Maybe in January we'll take the Christmas lights down and the Christmas tree down. Don't people usually keep the Christmas tree and Christmas stuff up until New Year's? Isn't that the way we do it now, or are we just lazy? You know, if he hadn't eaten all the staff here at Vaughn Manor, it wouldn't even matter. We could just, you know, order the staff to take stuff down. But no, you had to eat everybody in the entire manor. And now I have to vacuum this place myself. Thanks, Roger. Thanks. Anyway, I'm off track. We'll catch you next time.